given that you're not allowed to vote for yourself, who would each of the panellists give their £1 million to and why?
Okay.
Oh, God, stumped them.
Well, it's an incredibly easy answer for me, isn't it? Because I work with Rory in behavioural economics. I don't like to shit where I eat, so I'll give it to Rory.
Very good. Similar. The Herd, actually. We've done from me to we research, which I think has huge ability, which is untapped so far by research, which is get people to talk about other people. So instead of asking them about themselves, we are much better at other people than we are about ourselves. And that's a whole kind of, that's decades worth of advancement. So that gets my vote.
I'm going to go the same way, because I think he's onto something there with that other fellow you wrote the article with. Yeah.
Sorry, which way you go?
With John.
Ah, why? Because he voted for you.
Yeah. No, I think market research is not something that we just throw out the window. If you think clearly, it sounds really boring, but if you think clear about how you think the thing's going to work, apply whatever insights you've got from wherever, from science or elsewhere, and then set out to design a market research experience, you can learn lots of really good stuff. You don't have to go terribly crazy. It's how you think it works and then design the research around that, rather than let's have some technology that's going to make it easy.
So it's not just because he's your mate. Next one. Gemma.
Well, I can be strategic here, and I think I'm going to go with Mark, because social neuroscience is the cutting edge of where we are as neuromarketing specialists. There is a huge role for understanding how communications and products impact on the brain, and in ways particularly which either a group explanation or individual explanation can't get to, because you cannot introspect, for example, that warning labels on cigarette packs actually make you crave them more. And if you ask people that, they don't have any introspection on that fact. And they've done this really nice experiment. But then there's a whole, cosm in which these things play out. And if you're looking then to use insights like that, well, how do we change it? And what are the most efficient ways of then shifting the way the public behave? Then you have to take on board definitely all these kind of group dynamics. Plus, the reason I'm going with Mark is just because I'm feeling a bit mean, going to make Rory be left on his own.
Right. No, I don't know is the answer. What I'd say is that it's wrong to consider them mutually exclusive. What the real question is I'm absolutely make no apologies for the cop-out. The question is, in which order should you consider them? And that depends on a variety of things, how fast it is to do, in which case Nick's thing patently wins. I mean, I think, there is a sort of, there's absolutely nothing wrong with thought experiments. The Austrian School of Economics, who are in many ways the founders of modern behavioural economics and created the concept of praxeology, refuse to use mathematics, which is why they're spurned by all other economists, because they prefer to use thought experiments. It seems to me that thought experiments are completely valid and are incredibly fast and inexpensive. So you'd be kind of crazy to disdain them. What isn't represented here, of course, is the conventional methodologies we're all forced to use every day. There's nobody sitting on the stage saying, basically, I think Millward Brown have got it about right, and actually, I'm a really big fan of the brand onion, okay? We haven't got anybody here who's going, can we please bring back the brand onion, because it seems really useful, okay? So what is interesting, what's the really interesting question is the ratio of money that should go on what you might call the shamanistic role of research that is pretty much the 150-page insurance policy. It's basically, what the Romans would have done, they would have just chopped a chicken in pieces, looked at the entrails, and reached sort of common consensus that way. Yep. Now, instead of a Rhode Island Red, you've got a Millward Brown, basically. But I mean, the real point here is that actually most of what we're proposing is actually inexpensive to deploy. It allows you to look at things in a completely new, fresh and interesting way, which in turn will lead to fresh and interesting advertising, communication and product development and everything else. What's extraordinary about the alternative, the unrepresented alternative, is that it's expensive and slow, and probably no one here really believes in it. So one question is, what of all these skills do we need to understand to break the particular stranglehold that a kind of doctrinaire approach has over the whole business, if no one here instinctively really believes in it? Or are there instinctive defenders? You believe in it, do you?
No, I was going to ask, that's going to be my question. And could you just say who you are?
I'm Alex from MC Searching. I've got your Kindle. But that was going to be my question, which is clients are very suspicious, defensive about any kind of intellectual arguments. What techniques have you found in your various talking things that have made clients open up to it? Because they tend to cling on to those old methodologies. Have you found any techniques or ways of describing it that work? Any of your theories?
I mean,
two categories. The vast majority, I mean, to frame it, as Rory's been encouraging us to frame it and to answer your, it's like, I would say, to put a guess on it, 2/3 of all research, maybe 3/4, maybe more, is bought as Franklin's Gambit. And Franklin's Gambit is basically where you do a piece of complicated, analysis to prove what you've already kind of decided. And so actually, the intuition, that Nick's the empathy that Nick's suggesting is actually going on in business all the time. The problem with it is it's not done very well. It's done by arrogant or distanced kind of brand managers or whatever it might be who don't actually have the empathy. And so they've come to a conclusion. They spend money. I mean, I'm a recipient of that industry, but the majority of it feels spent on something they've already decided. And then there is, I don't know what it is, but it's a quarter, or I'd like to think it was more and growing, of people who genuinely want to learn, they're genuinely curious, they're genuinely either in the shit or they're trying to do something interesting. And then I think they're very open to techniques, and frankly, they use research in a really positive way. So, I don't know, that's a very big categorization, but one I've witnessed.
I think on top of that, there is, I've got to say, a herd effect.
yes.
And if you think about it, one of the first things that any research agency or any planning team putting together a proposal for anything will get asked by a client is, who else has done this?
Yeah.
So helping people see the other people doing it is a really big thing. I mean, if you consider how things like our obsession with word of mouth or CRM is another one, it's spread through not because of the elegant arguments that were proposed by the proponents of it, but because people saw other people doing it.
Absolutely
CRM
true. Yep.
it spread faster through the UK than it did in the US because of Tesco. Go figure. So get people to see what other people are doing and help communities develop, as I think you've done in Brainjuicer, people who are interested in the stuff you're talking about. So they see each other and they see, perhaps it's distorting the funfair mirror unfairly, but help them see other people like themselves and talk to each other.
There's actually a very important lesson here, which is, I mean, one of the reasons I was delighted to be IPA president just at the moment I kind of discovered behavioural economics was that actually the temptation is always, whenever you feel you have some form of slight psychological advantage, to make it a proprietary agency thing. And our instincts, driven by our obsession with things like USPs, is always, this is what makes agency X different.
Yep.
The problem is, if you're agency X and you go to your clients and say, this methodology is unique to agency X, they deep down are feeling, well, it must be pretty shit if only one agency uses it. Okay? And so our whole assumption about the USP is actually self-defeating, because what differentiates us actually makes us less than credible. So, I mean, one of the things about all these disciplines, by the way, I'm totally intrigued by this business that the health warnings on cigarettes make you want to smoke more. Because does this work in all...
You got any fags?
I haven't actually got it. But I was just thinking, does this work in all product categories? And would you sell more books if you put a big black thing on the front saying, danger of paper cuts? Every shampoo said, careful. So I'm just wondering, do we actually need a warning on everything? Are we missing a trick here? But I'm kind of fascinated. But actually, I think all these disciplines actually have quite a role to play in working out how you break this particularly strong and actually in B2B, bad thinking takes a hell of a long time to go away. Bad assumptions are very, very, very...
I think, Rory, because isn't the point is that the ideas are embedded in the practice.
Yeah.
And the practice is what we do every day. Marketing is not an intellectual practice. It's a discipline which is quite practical. We do this and then we do that. And a number of us in the room spend our time trying to be more intellectual than the average bear. But that's fine. But as a whole, it's not determined by big thoughts. It's really determined by practices.
The only thing I'd
Which have
say
been copied
it
from someone
is a really big problem is that it lacks now the intellectual credibility to carry into the boardroom. And so it is ranked way below accountancy as a reputable discipline that board-level people might consider. And so the whole of marketing has done itself a massive disservice in that sense, in that you can't, you know, you basically can't go into a boardroom with a bloody mood board.